All right, welcome back to Tri-City Sports Now. I'm Marky Billson, and I wanted to get to football coaching news because actually it broke yesterday that ETSU had hired their new football assistant coaching staff, and just like Randy Sanders told us on Tri-City Sports Now on Tuesday, he, got him to heavily imply there would be holdovers returning, and there are. I do kind of wonder why it took so long for those holdovers. Usually, you just say, oh yeah, we're going to keep him and all this. My guess is that a Billy Taylor, someone like that, he wanted to look around. He used to be a defensive coordinator at Tennessee Tech. They had an opening. Maybe I'd apply for that. But now that means that both offensive and defensive coordinator of ETSU have a Tennessee Tech tie, whatever that's worth, because Marcus Satterfield comes in as the offensive coordinator, which was something that was also heavily implied by Randy Sanders on Tuesday on Tri-City Sports Now. Here is the staff. Here are the guys that are coming back under Carl Torbush. Billy Taylor, defensive coordinator, inside linebackers coach, wide receivers coach, and recruiting, I don't want to say guru, because the team is 11-22. Come on, since reinstatement. But he is I think the recruiting coordinator is, I believe, the title of Raider. He's also the wide receivers coach, local ties, obviously, Raider. He's coming back. Gary Downs, the running backs coach, possibly a surprise because, let's face it, the ETSU running backs were literally falling over their own feet at crunch time. But hey, Gary Downs comes back. Defensive line coach Daryl Day. Outside linebackers coach Dylan Llewellyn. There's a name. Dylan Llewellyn. Okay, it's not quite as cool as, say, Joe Continental, but Dylan Llewellyn has its space of prestige just by saying it. And they're going to keep the strength and conditioning coach, A.J. Johnson. Come to think of it, there weren't that many injuries this past year, were there? Although I do wonder about strength and conditioning. Is that something that you really give to, you really, tell A.J. that's not the case. Do you really blame... I've always been a guy who, I didn't like blaming coaches for injuries. Guy falls on your leg, all right, he falls on your leg. No coaching in the world is going to prevent that. But after what has gone on at Tennessee the last 2 years, I really don't know. I really don't. And it's everything from playing Brett Kendrick when he got his bell rung, to the 50 starters, to bring in Rock Gullickson. And we talked about this with Caleb Calhoun yesterday. And he said, well, you couldn't, really blame it. But the Rams stayed healthy after Gullickson left. That's what we're talking Tennessee Vols. Now let's go back to the home team. Let's go back to ETSU. So A.J. Johnson, strength and conditioning coach. Hey, working for Lee Morrow. I like him. You know what the case is right there. Now, my thoughts on that, the big one is the retaining of Billy Taylor. And I think that is done because Taylor is such a popular member of the coaching staff. Many people wanted him to be the head coach, despite the 11-22 record. Taylor was part of, as I was, the BFFF, Buccaneer Football Foundation and Friends. Billy Taylor was the second guest, actually, on this show. Billy has played at ETSU. Once told me that I went to University High, and it was usually in a class they'd have a student, part of the ETSU teaching program, if you're not familiar with this, is that a student comes in and teaches a class at University High for 6 weeks. And then they're evaluated and all that. Okay. And I had that. And one of my teachers, I think it was with math, was a guy named Danny Cox, who was a tight end on the ETSU football team at the time. It was back in the 80s. Billy Taylor told me, man, you're making me feel old. He was my best friend on the team. But that's how far back he goes. He was instrumental in helping restore football to ETSU. And so maybe the fact that the secondary stunk last year they're looking the other way because Taylor was so popular. So he's being retained. I'm okay with it because, like you, I like Billy Taylor. Now, the new hire is Marcus Satterfield. By the way, I know Mike O'Kane got some criticism, as offensive coordinators of losing teams do. But it was always in the cards, I learned, that for O'Kane and Torbush were a package deal. So, O'Kane, the former NC State coach, and Torbush, the former UNC coach, boy, Buccaneers make strange bedfellows, don't they? They are riding off into the sunset themselves, so O'Kane is retiring, as is Torbush. Marcus Satterfield, who's been a guest on this show, former head coach at Tennessee Tech, where he was 6-16, becomes the offensive coordinator. In this case, ETSU is taking care of one of their own, but that's not such a bad thing. Satterfield was the possession receiver on the 1996 ETSU Buccaneers. Certainly the best ETSU team of the mini-dome era. We'll debate if they were better than the Grantland Rice Bowl team or not. Athletes as they go on are bigger and stronger and all. We get that. It's private. This team's undefeated. This one has 3 losses. Admittedly, the 3 losses were to the Division I AA teams. That's what they called them back then, that played for the national championship, as well as Division 1A then. It's now FBS, East Carolina. Those are the only 3 losses they had. They beat everybody. They beat Appalachian State. First time they beat Appalachian State since 81, I think it was. 15-year losing streak is over. There you are. So Marcus Satterfield, he was the possession receiver. He also was the punter on that team. You heard me. The punter as well as the possession receiver. His father coached Greenback High School to a state championship back in 1987. And in fact, Greg Ryan from Greenback, a 1A school, as was Satterfield from. And I believe Ryan is back at, last I heard he was back at Greenback. If he's not there now, he had been for a while doing some coaching there as well. But anyway, Ryan to Satterfield, just like it was at Greenback, they were the connection in 96 at ETSU. Going to the 10-3 record, beating Villanova in the playoffs, that sort of thing. I remember Mark Peace, former television sportscaster at WKPT. Remember that station? And also did some color commentary with Jay Santos on some televised high school broadcasts in years gone by. He once said that he thought the 96 team was the best ever ETSU team. Again, that's debatable, and it's always going to be a subjective argument. But with the Grantland Rice 69 team. But yeah, Marcus Satterfield, obviously, in terms of playing, yeah, he is Buccaneer royalty. What Buccaneer royalty may be, but I get the idea. So Satterfield comes in. There was, I'm getting some scuttlebutt. There are rumors about him. He was once suspended at Tennessee Tech, but an investigation cleared him up. I know there are some rumors out there about him. I hate to present him that way because I remember interviewing him for this radio station as a player. Enthusiastic, friendly. Not just as a coach, but as a player here for what WEMB, wisely employing Marky Billson, obviously, but for what was then, it was not a sports format. We had a sports show, but it was not then 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities. Anyway, Satterfield comes in. Here's the thing. He's bringing in a quarterback from Temple, where he used to be the offensive coordinator. And remember, as the offensive coordinator in Temple in 2015, the Owls beat Penn State, and it was Temple's first victory against Penn State since 1941. I know that Penn State was hurt by probation, but even so. Temple, which arguably used to be the worst major college football program in the country, is now quite the respectable program in the American Athletic Conference. You see, I think Paul Palmer made the College Football Hall of Fame, along with Frank Beamer and Charles Woodson. Did you see that? So, yeah, great running back for... Finished second in the Heisman in '86 was Paul Palmer. And, sure. So anyway, Satterfield was very successful at Temple That's got to be a different environment. You got Center City of Philly and Johnson City, Tennessee. That's two real big different, I mean, hugely different cultures right there. But hey, coming in. And I think it's a decent hire, especially when you look at the guys that he brought in. Now, the other coaches, Steve Brown, he used to work with Randy Sanders when Sanders was an assistant at Kentucky. Steve Brown will coach the defensive backs. As I recall, Tennessee beat Kentucky that one year in 2011, 10-7. Excuse me, Kentucky beat Tennessee 10-7. That was so the defensive backs had to play well in 2011 for Brown and for Sanders. Matt McCutcheon, he's been an assistant, actually quality control coach at Florida State the last 5 years. He becomes the Bucs' new offensive line coach. And those are the new hires. So a couple of guys with major college football experience coming in. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. And I think that the big question, I think there, I do ask, how good were the assistants that were brought in before? How good was a Gary Downs when the running backs last year slumped so much? But then again, you can only work with the talent that you got. So why do you bring back Mike Rader, the recruiting coordinator? Good question. I think that the idea, you remember Scott Carter saying as the athletic director when they were actually retirement press conference for Carl Torbush, that Torbush had laid a foundation. Well, you couldn't say he laid a winning one because he was 11-22. But if you retain some of the staff and all the staff really that's worthy of being retained, then there you go. Remember, defensive backs coach and offensive line, I would point this out. Defensive backs coach, remember, it used to be Teddy Gaines, and he was arrested last year for domestic abuse. So that's not going to come about. I did theorize a little bit about potentially Gerald Sensabaugh, who did a fine job at David Crockett, but he's running for Sullivan County mayor. So, football coach is generally a 24/7 job. It's tough to campaign when you're doing that. I do know one player. There was a player for the Bengals who actually served on city council in Cincinnati while he was playing for the Bengals. But nevertheless, I'm not sure that that's all that practical. Let's give you a couple of other bits of coaching news in the SEC. Will Muschamp just signed a 6-year deal for South Carolina. He'll be making $4.2 million a year, or $100,000 more than what Butch Jones made last year. I don't knock it at all. I didn't think Muschamp. When South Carolina got him, he was their third-string coach. You thought, okay, Gamecocks going back into the cellar again, 3-9. That was a nice run they had with Spurrier and a little bit with Holtz, but it's going to be losing records again for the Gamecocks. And then no, Jake Bentley, man. I think that the Gamecocks are dark horse contenders in the SEC East. And the fact that they will be playing Georgia in Columbia, Williams-Brice Stadium, early next season, when Georgia was coming together, if you will, when they'll be trying to recap from their losses. South Carolina, they'll be stronger with Deebo Samuel coming back. Already the preseason rankings have South Carolina ranked at the bottom of the top 25. But right now, if I was picking, I'm not sure I wouldn't go out on the limb right now. Because I could see South Carolina with an experienced team beating Georgia at home with a team that's trying to find itself. Of course, the thing is, Georgia is bringing in an outstanding freshman, just like they did with Jake Fromm and company before. But they won't have Chubb. They won't have Michelle. So it's a chance, maybe. A chance. That's all I'm saying. I think South Carolina will be dark horse contenders in the SEC East. If you ask me right now, I would probably pick my number one, Georgia on reputation, but that was sort of like Tennessee was ranked in the top 25 early on last year. But we'll go Georgia on reputation, South Carolina number 2, maybe Samuel's coming back, And then kind of wide open field. You think Florida will be better coached. Drew Lock comes back for Missouri. Vanderbilt now, a respectable program. Kentucky, you think Kentucky can be as good as they were last year? And then, yep, there's the Vols with the 0-8 rebuilding project. Jeremy Pruitt telling a talk show host yesterday he wants to change the culture at Tennessee. I'll be interested to see what that means. Got to change the losing culture, at least the 0-8, you know. Also of note in coaching circles, Mark Helfrich is the new offensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears. You may remember he used to be the head coach at Oregon, and he is a disciple of Chip Kelly. So Mitch Trubisky getting some highfalutin offensive playbook to run here next year for the Chicago Bears. Famous local athletic figure is retiring. I'll tell you who it is when we come back. Tri-City Sports Now.
WBMB Irwin.